listening to Best Served Cold, a Born Millennials podcast, the Australian true crime podcast where we drink wine and talk about crime.
Formerly Egypt's 36th most popular true crime podcast, hosted by Tama J and Laura Elise.
Sit down, relax, grab a drink, and enjoy this week's episode. Hello.
All right.
Welcome,
It's
friends.
the best day of the week.
Friends and foe alike.
It's the best day of the week for all you sexy mofos out there who tune in every week, 2 days of the week now, just to hear our fabulous voices.
Sultry,
Yeah.
dulcet tones.
Our, what was the term for it? Harsh vocal fry. Just to hear our beautiful vocal fry.
Yeah, I think someone left a... this was back when we started. Someone left a review about my vocal fry. But,
Yeah. So
you
fry
know,
you.
It is what it is. It is what it is. Anyway.
Fry these nuts.
Welcome to another week.
Anyway, welcome to another week.
Welcome to another week of Best Served Cold, the true crime podcast where we drink wine and talk about crime. I am one of your amazing co-hosts, Laura Elise, and I am best served shaken, not stirred.
Okay. Okay, we'll come back to that. And I'm Tama Tor. A dingo stole my attention span.
I think you've used that one before.
Have I?
Yeah.
Oh, no.
I think you might have actually used that exact one before, ages ago, but
No, I think that was serotonin. A dingo stole my serotonin. Yeah, so this is technically different.
Technically different.
Sure.
Same.
Yeah.
Anyway, welcome to the show. Just a quick disclaimer, if you're new around here, we do like to swear quite a bit in this podcast. So if the swear words are not your thing, we would kindly ask that you fuck off.
Yep. Sorry, not sorry.
Sorry, not sorry. You've been warned.
Yep. You've been warned. Don't leave a review. Don't get up in arms because you don't like it. If you don't like it, don't check out the podcast.
Don't listen.
Don't listen to another podcast.
Listen.
It's
Go
okay.
away. Anyway, welcome to another week. How are you feeling, Tama?
I'm feeling pretty good.
Yeah?
I'm really interested in this case, and it took me a long time to get the notes done, but it's a very fascinating case, and interestingly enough, it kind of delves into an early facet of history within our own country of sexuality and exploring sexuality.
Interesting.
And I really like that. I really dig that.
I'm officially intrigued.
Yes. How's your life going?
Well, it's been all right. I'm pretty excited to go out for dinner tomorrow night.
Yep.
So now that we can leave the house, us Sydney siders have been granted a little bit of freedom. So that's very exciting for us.
Melbourne are still in it?
Yeah, I think poor Vic is still
Or is that
in
one
lockdown.
TikTok chick refers to it as Melbourne?
Melbourne. I think that's just how Americans pronounce it.
I mean, it's not hard. It's not hard to just say bun as opposed to born, is it?
I mean, technically it is spelt with an R, so
Yeah, but like fucking half
it's just our fault for we never pronounce our R's in anything. But
I mean, not really. Like, think of half the states and cities in America that are named after.
Yeah, I just think it's different. It's different how they pronounce their R's.
Arkansas.
Well, they would pronounce that Arkansas, like Arkansas.
Yeah, but like look at how it's spelled.
Why are we talking about this?
Well, just look at how that's spelled and tell me that's like, yeah, I know that. I know exactly how to say that.
Arkansas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, tell me that is. Yeah, but look at that's because Melbourne has an R doesn't mean it's.
You literally just disproved your point.
What? What about Albury?
Oh, I don't know. Let's not talk about.
Like, but you know what I mean? Like, just because a word, fuck it, whatever.
You're getting so angry.
Well, because you make fun of me for these like things that are just like, I didn't invent the fucking word, or how we say things.
People are going to think we're having a domestic on the podcast.
What if we are?
Maybe we are.
What if we are?
But this is like, if you ever wanted an insight into our relationship, this is probably the most serious thing we ever fight about. Is pronunciation of words. Anyway, welcome to the show. We hope you enjoyed our new segment that came out. Enjoyed.
Okay.
I said enjoyed.
Okay. It sounded like you said enjoyed. I'm going to listen back to that.
Okay.
Just to make sure.
I hope you enjoyed our new segment that came out on Friday, On the Rocks, where we're going to be covering some not smaller cases. I don't want to use the word smaller cases, just I guess cases where there's not as much information available, so it's a little bit of a shorter episode. And
it's more so centered on like stuff that you guys suggest to us. It's like this show's the main show where we have cases and we like to go in on them and spend some time researching them. And then Friday's shows are just going to be like, you guys have suggested something, we're going to check it out. Or it's something that's vaguely interesting to us that we're just going to talk about for a bit.
Yeah.
It's just a smaller case with more content for you guys, for everyone, for anyone who wants to listen to it.
Yeah.
That's all it is.
And I guess before I quickly jump into mine, the last housekeeping would be if you want to follow us on social media, check us out. We are the BSC Podcast on everything. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. And you can check us out. We would love it if you would share the episode, leave us a review if you haven't already, because it genuinely helps grow the show. And yeah.
That's it. That's it, man.
You have anything else to add?
I have nothing to add apart from the word soaking.
Oh my God. You and your bloody obsession with this soaking thing.
Yeah. It's a good word.
Okay. I'm just going to dive into mine.
Go for it.
So I'm really sorry. I've really gotten on a roll with the unsolved ones.
Oh, that's fantastic. Great.
I kind of have fallen down an unsolved mystery, conspiracy theory rabbit hole where I've kind of just gone off not gone off serial killers, but I'm really on a roll with my tinfoil hat
You're really
conspiracy
getting
theories.
into edging our listeners.
I'm really enjoying it.
That's our new thing.
So today I'm going to be talking about the deaths of Don Henry and Kevin Ives, or more commonly known as the Boys on the Tracks.
Oh, okay.
So on August 23rd, 1987, the bodies of Don Henry, age 16, and Kevin Ives, age 17, were discovered after having been hit by a cargo train while they lay on the tracks. It was around 4 a.m. when a mile-long, 6,000-ton freight train was traveling to Little Rock, Arkansas.
Wow, okay.
Tragically, the driver did actually, because those things have pretty bright floodlights, so the driver did actually see them as he approached and tried to
It just takes so
stop.
long to
But
stop.
being, as I said, mile-long, 6,000-ton freight train traveling at about 50 miles an hour, those things don't just stop.
Yeah.
So due to the size and the weight of the train, it was unable to stop in time, and it ran over the bodies of the boys for more than 1,000 feet of the train body, passing over the top of them before the train comes to a full stop. Now, according to the train driver, the bodies, as he saw them lying on the tracks, were lying parallel across the tracks with their arms neatly by their side and a green tarp partially covering them. He said he could see a rifle on the ground also lying parallel to the bodies. Initially, when the bodies are autopsied, the death is ruled an accident. The official report said the boys fell asleep due to an overconsumption of marijuana, with the coroner saying the boys had smoked the equivalent of 20 marijuana cigarettes. So he basically was like they OD'd on pot, which, you know, that's a thing.
Sure. Yeah.
But let's talk about pot, right? Let's talk about being high.
Okay, let's do it.
We've both been high.
Yeah. If my mum and dad are listening, well, I guess my mum. No, I haven't. If my dad's listening, yeah. And we can cheer about that later. But
so
anyway.
we've both been under the influence of marijuana, let's just say.
Yeah, hypothetically.
You kind of allegedly. So we both understand allegedly what it's like.
Yes.
So you imagine a mile-long, 6,000-ton freight train blaring its horns, how much noise something like that would make.
Yeah.
You would have to be knocked out by horse tranquilizer to not hear that, no matter how much pot you'd smoke.
Yeah, I don't think people understand like what marijuana does to you. It's not like...
Yeah, it's not a sedative.
Yeah, it doesn't like...
I mean, technically it's a sedative, but it's not like...
But it's not debilitating.
Horse tranquilizer.
It's like, it's just a... Yeah.
So that's the official ruling, is that they'd smoked between the two of them 20 joints and fallen asleep on the train.
What year was this in again? Sorry?
1987.
Okay. I mean, that's kind of a weird year to sort of rule that.
So the parents are immediately dismissive of this official autopsy report and demand a second one. Larry Ives, Kevin's father, is particularly vocal about his disbelief of this theory. So after 5 months of campaigning, during which time family of the children's children note it seems impossible to get anywhere with them constantly meeting opposition from various authorities, a second autopsy is finally done after the bodies are exhumed, where it's discovered that Don had been stabbed in the back and Kevin had a crushed skull, which testing showed occurred prior to him being hit by the train. After this, their deaths are both formally ruled homicide.
Okay, but there you go.
It's also discovered that the boys had smoked one, at the most, 3 joints between the two of them. And at the time of impact, one of the boys was already dead and the other was unconscious.
Jesus Christ.
So the remaining mystery for this first part was that of the green tarp. So 4 different people in the train tragically witnessed the train going over the top of the boys, and they all said that a green tarp had been partially covering the bodies. However, when police arrived on scene roughly 40 minutes after the event, the tarp was nowhere to be seen, nor was it found in the surrounding scrub. Stephen Schroyer, the train driver, said the police initially tried to say that he'd never said there was a tarp. But then he also said when he did first mention it to the police, they originally tried to deny its existence and basically gaslight him into saying you didn't see it. And he's like, well, I did. And 3 other people also saw this tarp.
They sound fantastic.
Yeah. So let's get into some of the oddities and theories surrounding the case. So after the deaths of the boys, some stories started to emerge of odd happenings in that area. So 1 week prior to their death, a local police officer, Danny Allen, had said that he'd seen a strange man wearing army fatigues near the train tracks where the boys' bodies were found. When Allen attempted to stop the man to question him as to why are you out here, strange man in army fatigues on the train track, the man opened fire on him and fled into the woods, and police searched the area, but no one was ever found.
Love that.
So that's already like,
yeah,
okay.
Cool, dope.
On the same night that Kevin and Don were murdered, witnesses in the area around 200 yards from where the boys' bodies were found also reported seeing a man in army fatigues. So let's talk about some of the theories and people involved. Because there's really kind of one theory that people are like, I mean, this is what happened, but there's no real way of proving it. And because of the theory of what happened, it's so tied up with very powerful people that it's unlikely to ever.
They just don't want to concede
surface.
defeat, or really.
So I'd like to very briefly talk about a professional wrestler called Billy Jack Haynes.
Oh.
So on the same night that the boys' bodies were found, Billy wrestled in front of a crowd of 93,000 at the peak of his career. So he was a very famous, I think, WWF wrestler. Right. However, years later, after a long battle with addiction, he approached the boys' families, particularly his mother, Linda, Kevin's mother, Linda, to confess. So he claims that during his wrestling career, he also worked for a high-end drug circle that smuggled cocaine. He quoted to say, "I was an enforcer who provided muscle to other parts of the criminal element to ensure that their illegal business dealings were collected upon. In August of 1987, I was contacted by an Arkansas criminal politician and asked if I would provide muscle at an Arkansas drug transaction." He claimed he was asked by a prominent politician who he never named to check out local money drops in the area where he believed that cash was being stolen. So essentially what would happen in these drops is planes would fly really, really low over these forests, like throw drugs out the window, and then money would be left and someone would go and collect it later. So Haynes claims that he witnessed the 2 boys being murdered and their bodies placed on the train tracks in an effort to cover up the homicide. However, that particular theory, specifically of his involvement, seems improbable considering that he was that very night in a match and he would have had to make it several hundred miles to then witness the boys being murdered.
And this seems like it would be something he's doing outside of the competition of his regular workload.
In saying that, a lot of people say that this confession has come literally decades after his career is well and truly over. He really had no reason, like he didn't do some big high-profile interview. He just kind of approached one of the boys' family members. So it's, a lot of people are like, what reason would he have to have made that up? Like, it's not like he went to a current affair and did some
or wrote a book about it.
He just kind of offered up his own confession. So the drug theory, though, has a lot of weight to it. So let's talk about another man linked to the case, Dan Harmon. So February 1988. So failing to get anything accomplished through government agencies, the parents of the boys who were murdered take advantage of the media's interest in the case and hold a press conference to demand a new autopsy. Dan Harmon, who was a prosecutor who eventually becomes involved with the case, at that time had no official capacity, offered to help the parents to kind of push to get another autopsy. April 1988, Harmon is appointed to head a county grand jury investigation from which the deaths are then formally ruled homicide, and Harmon kind of becomes like a local town hero. During this time, witnesses of the crime seem to kind of wind up dead. There's a bunch of people involved in this case who wind up dead. Now, after all this has happened, a little bit further down the track, there's a separate investigation going on into Dan Harmon's involvement with drug smuggling by a man called Gene Duffy. And that seems very much this like David v. Goliath thing with Gene Duffy he's got all this alleged evidence, and every time he tries to bring it to someone, it kind of gets shut down, or he gets death threats, or witnesses he has suddenly disappear or go silent. In January 1994, the FBI opens their own investigation into the deaths of the boys on the train tracks after a witness says they saw Dan Harmon on the tracks the night the boys were murdered. This witness was placed in protective custody, passed a polygraph test, and had corroborating evidence that fit in with evidence Kevin's mother, Linda, had already collected. Now, the timeline gets a little bit spotty in terms of years, because if you want to believe what Gene Duffy says, it's all a big cover-up, so it's kind of difficult to collate information about Dan Harmon. But he is actually eventually arrested and charged with drug-related offences, but is eventually acquitted. So it's kind of odd that this man that inserted himself essentially into this story with no prior connection ends up really highly likely having connections with drug smuggling. So both Gene Duffy and Linda Ives both have strong suspicions that Dan Harmon was somehow involved in the boys' murder, and his subsequent part that he played in the investigation was all a part of a plot to kind of bend any evidence in his direction and cover up his kind of like make the investigation go the way he wanted it to go. So the parents were pushing to get a second autopsy, so he kind of made that happen so they could at least kind of put to bed those issues that they had with the accidental drug overdose that was very obviously not what actually happened.
Yeah, okay.
So they got their homicide ruling, and then it kind of went nowhere from there. Also worth noting at the time this is all happening, Dan Harmon is great pals with Bill Clinton, who was the then governor of Arkansas.
Okay.
As well, a woman called Charlene Wilson, who was the lover of Dan Harmon at the time this all happened, she said that she'd been with Harmon for a drug drop and stayed in the car witnessing the kids being killed from the car by Harmon and a couple of other people. Later on, she went further to confess to stabbing one of the boys, but then she was given a polygraph and that showed she was lying about the stabbing.
Right, okay.
She was ultimately arrested for selling drugs, and many believe that this subsequent arrest was actually another part of the cover-up to shut her up.
Yeah.
So the last man I want to talk about is a man called, and I could be mispronouncing this name, Farmy Malek, who was the doctor who initially, or the coroner rather, who initially ruled the boy's death as accidental suicide due to marijuana use. So Malek has been involved in multiple, let's just say, interesting coroner rulings.
Okay.
And has been investigated multiple times. However, after a hearing to raise his salary by 41% by local officials, the family of the boys attended to try and kind of push back against this, saying, why the fuck would you give him more money? And they eventually banded together to create the Victims of Malek's Incredible Testimony, or VOMIT.
That's awesome.
So they began petitioning to have Malek removed, and for 3 years, despite having a legitimate petition signed by multiple people, were denied the opportunity to formally present the petition. Yeah. Now, it is worth noting also that the area the boys were in, sort of that kind of large forest area, is a prominent dropping area, or was, for a drug circle that was run by a man named Barry Seals. So he was a commercial airline pilot involved in a major drug smuggling plot. And it's very well known that that area was an area that they used. So while they're not necessarily saying that it was Barry Seals, it's a proven fact that that area was involved in that kind of thing.
It's to say that it's very probable that these two boys were wrong place, wrong time.
Yeah, so the generally accepted theory, which basically pulls bits from all of the people I've talked about, was that the boys, while out hunting, because they'd gone out hunting together that night, stumbled across either a drug drop or a money grab, which likely involved the linings of the pockets of some very powerful people in their county state area, as mentioned by the wrestler Haynes. It's highly probable that politicians as well as district coroners were either in on it themselves or paid off very well by those who were involved to try and sway the investigation their way. Sadly, no sort of official answer has ever been found. I believe that all but Linda Ives, who was Kevin's mother, were alive till recently, and I think she passed away last year.
Okay.
But till the day she died, she was petitioning
campaigning
to try and find out what actually happened to her son and her son's friend. And that is the story of the boys on the tracks.
That is fascinating. Like, that is just such a crescendo of a story.
It's really interesting, isn't it? Because it really sounds like
a movie plot. Really.
Yeah.
Like, two boys stumble upon something they probably shouldn't have seen, and it just goes awry for them. And it even has the 80s trope of a fucking pro wrestler as like hide muscle. Like, that's insane.
But if you are interested in reading more, there's obviously, as with all these conspiracy theories, there's so much information on Reddit. But there's also a really good 4-part series that another podcast called True Crime Garage did. And it goes into, obviously it's a 4-parter, so it goes into quite a bit more detail than I have done. But yeah, it's a really good series that I would recommend you check out if you want to hear some more. But yeah, it really does kind of sound like most people are like, yeah, well, that's what happened, but there's just no way of proving it.
It's a combination of like these different facets of. So there's this weird coroner who fucked up the first autopsy
multiple times
and has fucked up many different cases in his whole life. Mysteriously, after 5 months, there's a second look at the bodies, and a pro wrestler approaches the family, telling him of his involvement, and a person who was involved, according to that theory, and that is involved with Bill Clinton. It's like, it's fucking hell, Jesus Christ. Like, and it holds like weight as well, because we all know well and truly that the Clintons have some pretty suspect things surrounding them. Yeah. Many different kinds of weird deaths. Yeah, well, yeah. The other thing worth mentioning that I didn't want to put too much weight on because I couldn't really corroborate it, but I read somewhere that this Malek doctor had once put it through a coroner report that someone had died from an ulcer when they'd been decapitated. What? But he was like, cause of death, stomach ulcer. And there's like, bro, I'm pretty sure cause of death is the fact he doesn't have a fucking head anymore. Yeah, an ulcer, his stomach isn't connected to his fucking mouth. What do you think? I'm pretty sure that's the issue, bro. His brain's gone. He's not a chicken. Yeah. He's dead. But he was like, no, it's definitely the ulcer. No, I did it to a chicken one time. It was pretty fucking weird. This guy sounds like he's on 10 marijuana cigarettes. Yeah. But yeah, 41% pay rise. Yeah, that's so that like just screams. There's something going on there. There is something going on there. That is weird. But yeah, that is the conspiracy theory / story of the boys on the tracks. And just another tally to the weird Clinton family circumstances. Well, whether or not they were directly tied, but it's just weird that it's just another thing that they're like loosely connected to. That's just fucking weird. Like, there's another one about a robot car losing control and crashing into a tree, killing someone who was connected, who had information on the Clintons. Oh my God, I've never heard that before. I might talk about it one time because it's incredible. There's a car that they think was hacked into that lost control, drove into a tree, burned, killing the person inside
Jesus.
who had information against the Clintons.
That's wild.
Yeah. And,
Wow.
we all know about Epstein potentially having something against Bill Clinton.
Yeah.
It's
I
just
love
weird.
me a good conspiracy theory.
There's no I don't think there's much weight to it, but it's just like
That's
fucking weird.
Yeah.
But I'll definitely talk about that case one day for
Amazing.
sure. All right, we're gonna take a quick break, guys. So get your poo-poos, get your pee-pees in. You have
and pee-pees?
You have about 30 seconds if you can.
Speed poo.
Yeah,
you
speed
can do
poo.
it.
I mean, you can listen to this podcast while you're pooping. There's no rules.
You don't have to tell us. We'd never know.
Yeah, you can if you want
You
to,
can
but
tell
I'd
us if you
rather
want
you
to.
didn't. That'd be great. Anyway, we'll take a short break and we'll be right back after these non-messages. We are back.
Back again.
Okay, so this week I am talking about what is referred to as the Bogle Chandler case. This is another Australian case, and as I said, it's pretty interesting because it delves into a little bit, just a little, toe into the waters of history in Sydney, on something that I didn't really know existed. So, very interesting. So I'm talking about Gilbert Bogle and Margaret Chandler. These two people, it's a very convoluted, interesting story. So I'm just going to start with who they are.
Okay.
Gilbert Stanley Bogle was born in 1924. He was a physicist for the CSIRO, which is the Commonwealth Scientific and Industrial Research Organisation, on the campus of University of Sydney. He was well regarded for his abilities as a scientist. I think he was award-winning. Just very good at his job. He was married with children, though he frequently had casual and sexual relationships with other women.
Okay.
One of whom was it's thought to be that he had one with a woman called Margaret Chandler. Margaret Olive Morfett, who later married Geoffrey Chandler and assumed his last name, was born in 1934. They had 2 children together. Geoffrey Chandler, who was Margaret's husband, happened to work at the same building in the CSIRO building as Bogle did. Just like Gilbert, Margaret was supposedly interested in casual relationships as well, and this is believed to stem from the Sydney push subculture that was connected to the University of Sydney. Now, a brief deep dive into what Sydney push was. It was around the late 1940s to early 1970s, mostly operating within pubs in Sydney. It involved students, academics, musicians, journalists, etc., all of whom were predominantly left-wing and following the free love ideology that love comes without consequences and that you shouldn't be held behind, feeling guilty for just wanting love. The majority of the members were typically made up from the Faculty of Arts students and staff from the Sydney University, but later in the 60s, students and staff from University of New South Wales also got involved. This was mostly predominant within pubs and establishments within Sydney, hence the name Sydney Push. Mm-hmm. It's also referred to as The Push, as it was sometimes called. The most well-known pub that this was operating at was the Royal George Hotel at Sussex Street in the CBD of Sydney, which has now been renamed as the Slip Inn in more recent years. This is where, if you don't know where El Loco and Chinese Laundry are,
yes,
that's the hotel.
The Excelsior.
No. It's that building there.
Right.
It's called the Slip Inn.
Okay.
But it holds El Loco and I believe Chinese Laundry.
Right.
It's now regarded as a heritage building.
Mm-hmm.
It's just been renamed from its original name of Royal George Hotel, which we'll probably see one day because we're out of lockdown. I can take you there and show you exactly where it is. So to sum it up, basically, here's an excerpt from Clive James' Unreliable Memories. Quote, "The Royal George was the headquarters of the downtown push, usually known as just the push. As well as libertarians and the aesthetes, there were also small-time gamblers, traditional jazz fans, and the homosexual radio repairmen who had science fiction as a religion. The back room had tables and chairs. If you stuck your head through the door or the back room, you came face-to-face with the push." Now, to go back to Margaret Chandler, as mentioned before, her husband Jeffrey worked in the same building as Gilbert Bogle. Margaret had actually met Gilbert Bogle while she and Jeffrey were attending a barbecue sometime before the Christmas period of 1962. On their drive home, Margaret had told Jeffrey that she was quite interested in Bogle, and Jeffrey told her that if he wanted to take Gib, as he referred to him as, a lover, then if it made her happy, she should do it. Another person who worked at the CSIRO building was Ken Nash. Ken and his wife Ruth were hosting a New Year's Eve dinner party at their home in Chatswood. Ken had invited Margaret and Jeffrey Chandler as well as Bogle over. The Chandlers arrived at around 10 p.m, with Jeffrey leaving at around 11:30 p.m. to attend a Sydney Push New Year's Eve party in Balmain. This was hosted by a man called Ken Buckley. It was here where he met Pamela Logan, who was a woman he was incidentally having an affair with, where they later on travelled to where she was staying in Darlington. Jeffrey returns to the party at Chatswood at 2:30 a.m, but shortly leaves again on his own to their home in Croydon, as Margaret said she would be returning home with Bogle.
That's a fucking trek and a half across Sydney.
These people are fucking partying like crazy.
Darlington to Chatswood to Croydon. That's
okay. Like it's a fair drive from fucking
Darlington to Chatswood.
To Chatswood it's not like hours, but it's like, that's a drive.
Yeah.
It's like 30, 40 minutes.
Well, especially in those times, yeah.
So around 4 a.m, Bogle and Margaret depart from the party and they drive to the nearby Lane-Cone River, which is also known as Lover's Lane. Sometime later, two boys who were searching for golf balls near Fuller's Bridge at the same river come across Bogle lying down on the ground. They assume that he's just drunk, so they carry on about their business. It wasn't until about an hour later they came back and they found that he had still not moved at all, in the exact same position he was in. As well, now his face had turned basically blue, so they immediately sought help. Upon arrival, police immediately noticed that Bogle was half-dressed with his trousers placed over the back of his legs, making it appear like he was wearing them haphazardly. A piece of carpet was placed onto his back with his jacket placed over top of that. Sometime later, police had also found the body of Margaret Chandler a short distance away. She too had been half-dressed with her body partially covered by a cardboard beer box. Both the bodies had been found with vomit and excrement seemingly before they passed away, indicating that they may have been poisoned. Potentially, in what could be in the detriment of this case, the forensic examination for both bodies were delayed by 36 hours because this was, of course, on New Year's Day, and that is, of course, a public holiday. So, fuck. When examination could finally begin, they could find no trace of poison. Almost immediately, though, this case is just the talk of the town.
You would think something like that maybe warrants someone getting overtime to work on a public holiday.
You'd think so, wouldn't you? Yeah, and you think like police, it'd be kind of different, but they're like, hey, mate, that's
January 1st.
That's Monday.
No one's going to take me
mate,
January
it's Sunday.
1st.
That's Monday's problem. Like, come back to me later.
God's day.
Anyway, as I said, this case is just blowing up. Especially at this time, I don't think things like this typically happen. So, also the main reason is because this story involves mixing of partners, potential poisoning, and there's even theories that a third person was there at the death scene.
Scandal.
As well as that, there's another theory that suggests that Bogle was involved in research for the Cold War.
Ooh.
Yeah, so we love a good, like, especially this time period, we love a good, scandal with the Cold War.
Russians.
Yeah, so even the coroner, Mr. J.J. Loams, was stumped, essentially concluding in his inquest that Bogle and Margaret had died either as a result of their heart stopping, and two, either of that or their breathing.
Yeah, that would do it.
He literally says in the inquest, anything further cannot be determined because there's no fucking evidence to say so. He goes, here's how they died, probably, That's all I know.
It's like, look, I'm pretty sure either the lungs shut themselves or the heart shut themselves.
One or the other fucked up. I don't know which.
Dude's still hungover from New Year's Eve, and he's like, mate, I think it was the heart or the lungs.
I had a razor the other day, and I'm just ready just to call it quits.
He's like swaying and slurring. And they're like, dude, you're okay. He's like, yeah, I'm fine. It's the heart. This heart stopped working.
Now, another thing that was fucking loved in this time period was the theory of LSD, especially because they were happy-go-lucky, free-loving hippies.
The hippies and the Russians were
big
just...
thing. So while there was absolutely no trace of LSD found in the system, police spent most of their time and most of their leads investigating this theory, believing it to be a sound theory. So this was further disproved with tests in 1996 when they were sent to America using what they had remained. I don't know exactly how it works, but they have what is referred to as...
Yeah, the CIA knows all about LSD. They were like, yeah, bro, send it to us, we'll know.
Well, so they have, I can't remember what the term is, but they have ways of retesting this with better techniques.
Yeah.
So they sent it off to America to be like, hey, figure this shit out.
Yeah.
And America comes back saying they're negative results for LSD.
They're like, can you test it again?
Yeah. They actually did. They tested it multiple times. I believe twice just to make sure. But they were like,
are we sure?
Yeah, they're like,
are we sure it's not LSD?
It's not LSD. They're like, you guys need to give the fuck up. Anyway, here is what most likely happened, and it is a gag. It is okay. So one of the more sound theories comes from a documentary called Who Killed Dr. Bogle and Mrs. Chandler, which originally aired in 2006 on ABC. Now, this theory presents that the documentary points out several key features of this particular theory. A couple of decades before the case, a local council received complaints from residents saying that the river was producing a rotten egg smell, some saying it was causing nausea and even difficulty in breathing. The bottom muds of the river were found to be completely saturated with hydrogen sulfide, and that a section of the river could potentially be releasing large amounts of hydrogen sulfur gas. It was found that the source was coming from a factory that was pumping out waste in the river since the 1890s, the worst affecting area being the weir exactly where Bogle and Margaret had died.
Interesting.
Gag. Other elements would support this theory from the Black River sediment from the day when their bodies were found on New Year's, weather conditions and local location providing an ample environment for gas to accumulate, and the most damning of all, a purple discoloration was found in both victims' blood, which is fairly common in cases of hydrogen sulfide poisoning. To better explain this, here's some fucking science for it, all right? You ready for this? And just take this with a grain of salt because I'm not a scientist. Okay. I just briefly researched this.
Wait, you're not a scientist?
No, I'm not.
Why do you wear a lab coat all the time?
That's my king. You don't bring that up. So hydrogen sulfide is heavier than air. It is a gas, so it is invisible to the eye. And at certain amounts of it, we're using the measurement ppm, which is parts per notation, which is what they use to measure things that are too small, or rather gases that can't be measured any other way. You can't measure them with like millimeters or centimeters. What?
Nothing, just I'm immediately thinking of a penis joke.
Okay. Fantastic. Anyway, so at a small amount, you can't detect anything, and at a certain level, you can smell the gas.
That's what she said.
Okay, so...
I'm so sorry, I'll stop.
Thank you. The hydrogen sulfide being heavier than air, it needs a breeze for it to dissipate. Otherwise, it'll just pull together. Okay?
That makes sense.
It's thought that when Bogle and Margaret arrived, the gas level was relatively low, and while an eruption occurred further upstream, it carried down to where they were, measuring at around 100 to 150 ppm, parts per notation. This being what is proposed to be a typical level in the area on days with no breeze. And wouldn't you happen to know it, on this particular night, it was a still night. There was no breeze. It was cold, perfect conditions for this gas to build up and pull, no way for it to dissipate. So at 30 ppm, just to give you a reference point, hydrogen sulfide will produce the rotten egg smell, which is what most people were smelling in the area. While at 100 plus ppm, which is what they believed it was at that time, will instantly paralyze the olfactory nerve, which is your sense of smell, eventually leading to vomiting and breathlessness if you're left around it too long.
Interesting.
So as Bogle and Margaret have spent quite a substantial amount of time within that 100 to 155 range, and it's pooling, it's just subsiding, it's not going away. This could have led to nausea and breathlessness, and being that gas is invisible and their sense of smell has been completely compromised, they have no idea
what's going on.
They have no idea what's going on.
Plus they were drinking, so they were probably just like...
Yeah.
Thought they were throwing up from...
Eventually, as a result of the hydrogen sulfide binding with the hemoglobin in their blood, this would lead to a reduction in oxygen capacity and further disorientating them, making it difficult to comprehend what's going on. Your brain doesn't go... oxygen doesn't go to your brain. What do? You freak out. Also, making it extremely difficult to escape the area from the gas. So seemingly, they just spent too long in there to figure out how to get out, and they just got stuck, eventually slowly dying from hydrogen sulfide poisoning.
Jesus.
Yeah.
That's bleak.
Now, there was an actual investigation into the third person that was present in the scene. So police originally sort of didn't necessarily, or rather detectives didn't necessarily think that there was a murderer per se, but they thought there was a third person present just due to witness statements and evidence that they found. And it was eventually found that the prime suspect of this person was a greyhound racer, or I believe they were a greyhound racer or a breeder. And they had claimed that they found the bodies and just covered them up to, like, you know, pay respects to them or like make them look more respectable, and then just left.
Well, it sounds like if his pants were off, it sounds like they were in the middle of maybe...
What it seems to be is that they went to this Lover's Lane area, started pumping, and were naked. And, you know, being in that area for so long, they're disorientated and then slowly dying. They freak out. But the reason why Margaret might have been so far away is that
she
might have tried to escape the area or couldn't figure out what's going on. And then these bodies were found. I mean, why you don't immediately call the police when you see bodies? Maybe he thought they were passed out and just wanted to cover them up.
Drunk as well.
Maybe, but so that's where the third person comes in, and there's nothing really. I didn't find anything substantial on that, but there's enough to say, like, yeah, totally, that makes sense.
Very interesting.
That's like the proper way for that to go out. But yeah, a completely weird circumstance that has no real conclusion to it because nothing's been definitively said, and we don't know if that's how they died because we just don't know.
Yeah.
But it's most likely the instance of how they died, and it's completely crazy and would be a fucking gag to this company if they were making this fucking poisonous water in a frequent spot where people were diving in to collect golf balls.
Yeah.
Anyway, that is the case of the Bogle Chandler case.
Very cool.
A very interesting case.
I liked that one. I mean, I didn't like it, but...
No. But I thought it was a pretty interesting case because it gives you gives you a moment to sort of deep dive into these different aspects of, like, hey, some history on Sydney and, like, the free love movement in Sydney and how cool that is. You know what I mean? Like, Sydney has some cool history with that, like the LGBT community in Sydney. Like, and it's all around pub culture as well and university culture, which is fucking sick.
Very cool. That was a really good one. I really enjoyed that.
That was, just a fascinating case because, again, it's kind of like yours where it's just like there's seemingly weird things around it. Like, it could have been a jilted lover. There was theories of that. It could have been like there was the red theory. There was the LSD theory, and all of whom were, like, disproved.
Wow.
Essentially. Yeah. All right, guys. Thank you very much for listening. This is the end of the case. section of the
I
show.
thought you were just ending the episode. Then I was like, whoa.
This is the ending of the case section of our show where we just, do our cases. We are now diving into our sort of fluff section. So if you're just here for the cases, we'll see you guys next week, or Friday rather, for two additional cases for this week. And if you're here for the fluff, welcome. Welcome
to the fluffiness.
Let me just take a sip of my wine here. Yeah, very good. Very good wine.
Hey, I told you to give this one a few more days.
This wine?
Yeah.
What was wrong with it?
Do you not remember?
No, I don't remember this.
Oh, dear. So Tama had a big night on Saturday, and there's multiple parts of the evening when he came home that he apparently doesn't remember. So I gave him a taste of this wine on Saturday night that I just opened and put in a decanter, and he was like, oh, it's disgusting.
Was that the wine or was that the pizza?
No, it was the wine. You didn't like the pizza as well,
okay.
But the wine, you were like, it's disgusting. That tastes like piss. And I was like, yeah. Well,
no, that was the blonde.
No, it was the red as well.
No, I don't remember.
Okay, I remember.
I remembered
because I was completely sober at that point of the evening.
Okay, but I called the orange wine piss. I remember that.
But you also called the red wine almost undrinkable, and it tastes like piss.
Almost undrinkable. So I'm like,
almost.
I can drink this, but I don't want to.
And I told you to give it a couple of days in the decanter, and it would taste nice.
Or just being sober. That typically helps.
No, because it wasn't that nice on Saturday.
Okay.
I didn't like it either.
So like, I probably would have said the same thing sober.
So dramatic, though.
I think that's dramatic.
That's the funniest thing about you when you're drunk. It's so hilarious when I'm sober and you're drunk. You're so dramatic. It's
I'm like a movie character. I'm just like, things are just.
It's amazing.
Yeah, I'm just practicing for my career as a Hollywood actor. Really. If anything, that shows you why fucking actors are drunk half the time.
They need to be be dramatic.
Yeah. Harrison Ford shows up to Indiana Jones drunk as fuck. It's just because he's a good actor. Don't you dare judge him.
Don't you dare.
Yeah, you piece of shit.
I hope you've all had a good week.
Yeah. To our Sydney listeners, I hope you guys are staying safe still and just enjoying, things.
What we can do. Like
relatively going back-ish to normal-ish.
Yeah.
Not really, but sort of-ish. We recently purchased a pull-up machine thing. Or not a machine, like a pull-up bar thing and whatever that core stuff is.
I don't know.
We're leveling up our workout game.
We got to figure out how to put it together.
Yeah, we don't know how to do it. It's a fucking nightmare, but it'll be sort of worth it once we do it, I guess.
If we can get it to fit together. We also have Toffee here joining us in the studio room, who's decided that now is the perfect time to demand attention. Despite the fact she's been asleep nearly all day.
So she's screaming out. If you hear a cat meowing out, that's most likely her. And Laura's currently picking her up, and she's regretting every decision she's ever made in this past 5 seconds. The face says it all. If you guys could see the face. It is just a face of, fuck.
She hates her life.
I can't believe you've done this.
She hates her life.
Yeah.
That's what happens when you annoy me. I give you cuddles and you hate it. Anyway, enough cat talk.
Yeah, enough cat talk. We have a appointment tomorrow to eat tacos.
An appointment?
Yeah, where we have made an appointment with a taco doctor to eat tacos.
I'm severely lacking in vitamin taco.
Yeah, and vitamin
margarita.
Cocktail. Yeah. So we're gonna have some tacos from this wonderful place in Newtown.
Vendale Taqueria. It's all
really
vegan tacos, but you would never know they're vegan. Yeah. They're so good. So if you're in the inner west, I would highly recommend.
Yeah. I mentioned a lot of Sydney names in this case as well. So sorry to our American audience who probably have no fucking clue what I'm talking about. Just look it up on the maps. It's what we typically have to do when we research American cases because we're like, where the fuck is Connecticut?
Yeah.
Do they know where it is?
Yeah. So many states.
Yeah. God damn this, and just names and places that just have such fascinating names, and you think you know where they are, And then you're like, okay, that's not where it is.
Yeah.
There's like, apparently there's a London somewhere in either America or Canada. I don't know which one it was, but they have a London as well. And you're like, that's just confusing.
Yeah. It is.
Yeah. Or Texas.
I think there's a Paris as well. I think
it has
there's
in
a Paris
Texas.
in Texas.
Yeah, and you're like, why the they're just like, you know what?
We
want one as well.
Yeah.
We want one as well, please.
Oh dear. I don't have any like very smart updates because I haven't had time to read that much since last Wednesday.
Yeah, you haven't had a chance to fiddle with your fairy G-spot.
Please don't ever say that again.
Okay.
That was too much.
Okay.
That was stop. She keeps trying to rub her head against
get her off of
the
your fucking
microphone.
lap then.
She likes it. She
it's
never
giving me
sits on
anxiety.
my lap.
I think she's going to jump on the fucking laptops and...
I have to take what she gives me. She never sits on my lap willingly. I usually have to hold her.
She's not willingly sitting there. She's trapped.
She's not trapped. Oh yeah, she's trapped by my leg and the... Okay.
Just you grabbing her.
Go on. She doesn't want to get down. She's enjoying herself.
Okay. It's a bit of a weirdo.
She is a bit of a weirdo, but she's my weirdo.
Yeah, so we're excited for tacos. We have a couple of different plans to go to. We have a pub we're going to at some point. We have a bar that we really like called Papagetti's in the city, which incidentally is sort of near where this hotel I was talking about is in.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, well, it's in the CBD.
Cool.
And Papagetti's is like right by. It's part like I can't remember what the street was, but it's like
for a little walk by.
Street. Yeah, we'll walk by it. But you know where Chinese Laundry is? It's in that. Okay, well then perfect.
I never went clubbing. I'm not cool enough. I don't know where anywhere is.
Chinese Laundry was pretty dope back in the day.
I'll tell you a funny story.
Okay, let's do it.
The only thing I know about Chinese Laundry is that when I was in high school / the first years preceding high school, I was in like a weird on again, off again thing with this dude who was a compulsive liar. Like he would just... But because I was so obsessed with him, I'd like look at him with these big like Google eyes and be like, oh my God, tell me more. Yeah. But now I look back, I'm like, that was a fucking lie.
Yeah, I hate that.
Even at the time, I think I was like, well, that's clearly not true.
Yeah, but you're like, oh, that guy is all right.
So he told me this story, and now I'm about to say it out loud. I'm like, why the fuck did you like this idiot? So he told me this story about how he went to Chinese Laundry to go clubbing, and the club was... Oh, God. The club was like so poppin', so going off, and so like hot and sweaty and humid that the collective humidity from the people in the club dampened the ceiling and the ceiling fell down.
That's not a thing.
No.
That's scientifically
And I remember
inaccurate.
him telling me this story about, oh, it was crazy, man.
Yeah.
Like the ceiling fell just because from everyone's sweat.
And you're like, okay, Quentin Tarantino, let's just
okay, I love
calm down a
you.
bit. Yeah.
Please love me.
Yeah.
Yeah, but now in hindsight, I'm like, that was a fucking lie. It wasn't even a good lie.
Yeah, Michael Bay's hitting him up like, dude, you have great ideas.
Let's talk.
Yeah, let's talk. Let's talk money.
But yeah, I look back and I'm like, why?
Yeah.
Why?
It's fascinating that during those times you can see red flags in people and just not do anything about it. Which is why I think like people who, I don't want to say like privileged, but like people who haven't necessarily gone through experiences with like abusive people or people who treat you very poorly, or just, I guess, negative, bad people to be in relationships with. And you see those red flags and people are like criticizing others for like, you saw the flags, like, why didn't you leave that person?
I saw and I chose to ignore.
Yeah. That's the thing. You don't really know any better. You can't leave because there's many different facets of it.
Well, sometimes it's not that you don't know better. Sometimes it's like you know better, but you don't think you can get better.
That's not what I really want. It's not like what I meant. Like, not that you don't know better, but it's not that. It's just that you don't see any other alternative.
Yeah.
You don't really see like leaving them as an option, or like
Yeah, like you
not
don't think
getting
you could
further
do
with them.
better.
Yeah, exactly. And you
Yeah.
think like, this is just what I got to put up with to have this, which is why like I hate when people criticize people who have been abused and in abusive relationships, and like, why don't you just get out of it? Like, why did you stay so long with them? It's like, that's like fucking, you can't help it.
Yeah. And sometimes you don't know how bad something is until you like take a step back and you're like, oh.
Yeah. Well,
okay.
I think too, because in like my experiences with like just abusive people, being my relationship with you being, it's like my first real like my actual first relationship where I can say like someone I lived with and shared expenses with and, just did things with. It took me to get into that and realize like, oh, like a relationship isn't this thing where someone treats you like shit and then they treat you nicely, like 10% of the time, and then you exist just for those moments.
Yeah.
It's fascinating because when you and I met each other, we were at points in our lives where we weren't looking for fucking
we'd
anything.
both come out of terrible relationships.
Yeah, and we were just like, I don't really know what the fuck to do in a relationship setting.
Yeah.
And I think that's what made us work so well from the beginning, was just like, we were raw. Like we were like just
I think
blank
it's also
canvases.
we're both fucking weirdos.
Yeah, but like,
well.
I mean, not like the fact that we're soulmates kind of helps.
Aw, that's
But like,
a bit cute.
you know what I mean? Like we kind of entered into our relationship sort of being like, hey, I'm a blank slate. I don't know what the fuck I'm doing.
Hey, I'm depressed.
Yeah.
And you were like, me too.
Yay!
High five.
Yeah, but it's fascinating to look back on those experiences. And it's not just relationships, it's friendships as well.
Yeah.
People that you sort of cling on to because you went to high school with them, or they're just all
Isn't it so interesting though how, and I've noticed it's a big thing with like people who I look back and I'm like, oh, you were a proper narcissist. It's like, they know how to just like drip feed you enough, just enough attention to keep you hooked, but not enough that you can accuse them of being like, well, you made me think that this was more than it was. And they were like, I literally sent you one text message every 3 weeks. And you were like, yeah, but damn it.
And then you throw in manipulating, gaslighting, the whole works. It just adds up to that.
Yep.
I not so much like, more so with friendships I've had that, where I've had someone, and you and I being the kind of people that are like, not dependable, but like we're vulnerable. Yeah. Which is why I think like I got dragged into those relationships with people because I was someone who depended on someone. I needed someone to sort of like vent to and to have a connection with, because me being solitary is where my mental health gets like the worst. And needing someone to connect to and having someone to share things with is so important for me, that I think I connected with these people specifically.
The wrong people.
And being those kinds of people where they love to draw from your energy when they want to do so, and they drip feed you exactly what you said, just the right things. It draws in people like you and I.
Did you know in the spiritual community they're called energy vampires?
Really? That makes sense. It's very vampiric what they do. I also think that's kind of why when my like depression was the worst, I almost joined a church in my area.
Oh, religious trauma.
Yeah. So I had a friend that I went to primary school with who went to a different high school. He went to a Christian school, and during my like deep depressive state, I kind of like cut off a lot of connection with people. And he was in my area, so I kind of saw him every now and then. And he was like, I was talking to him about what I was going through, and I met all these friends, and he took me to youth, which, if you don't know what youth is, it's just like local Christian churches or different kinds of churches will have.
I think it's a big thing in like Pentecostal song churches.
So you have like sort of adults, young adults as like youth leaders who they'll host games and like fun sort of things and education or whatever. There's I don't want to like say it, but in some instances, it's very like cultish, like join us.
And I think it's interesting you say that, because like I had a very similar situation with me going back to church, because I like always went to church with my mum, and then I kind of like lost interest when I was around like 15 to 18 maybe. And then it was a very similar thing. I was in a really, really bad headspace mentally, and I don't think the friend that brought me back to church, I don't think he in any way was like taking advantage. I think he genuinely thought it would help. It would help me.
Yeah.
But I do think like whether or not they did it in a like, I don't know, but I don't think I've ever experienced such bitchy clickiness than I have from the girls at a Pentecostal church, which is like, that's not, I thought your whole vibe was like love and light, babes. Like, why are you being such a, I don't know.
What's sort of interesting is that, and I agree that I think the person who was doing it to me wasn't necessarily doing it in a like,
No, I think like both of the people were probably doing it out of a place they were like, Jesus will help you.
But also,
you're like,
I think
help me.
They came from areas where someone did it to them.
Yeah.
And then now it's sort of starting this like this pyramid scheme of,
but it's
you
like,
can
I don't
help
need Jesus.
someone
I
else.
just need antidepressants.
I think this person who did it to me was just sort of someone who found happiness through doing that, which is fantastic. Like, whatever works for you, and as long as you're not using that as a blanket to like hide your your misogyny or your homophobia, like don't use that as a blanket for that. Like,
but it was just like weird things, because I particularly ended up moving in with two of the girls that I went to church with. That was the first house I moved out of my parents' house with these two girls. And I just remember like one Saturday morning, like I was in a depression. Like going to church did not fix my depression. Surprise. And like I think I'd slept in, and I like walked into the kitchen as like her and the other girl were like getting ready to leave for church. She was like, "Oh, you're not coming to church?" And I was like, "Nope. Just gonna probably go and cry in bed, like deuces." Like, just the weird, like judgmental undertone. Like, no, I'm not coming to church because I want to kill myself. Like,
it's not. We're not of the sound mind to find solace in
You're
church.
not making it any better.
Some people just can't like. Some people find a release in that, which is fantastic.
My thing is, I don't have a problem with anyone. Like, I truly believe in the genuine definition of religious freedom. Like, if you want to be Christian, if you want to be Catholic, Buddhist, like, you do you, live your bliss. Like, don't force your shit on me. Don't force your shit on me.
Yeah.
Like, but no, I know a lot of people that like religion has, especially people that really suffer from like addiction and stuff like that. It can be really, really genuinely helpful.
A lot of convicts who have gone to jail for serious crimes sort of find what they call a second life. Yeah. Like they spend the rest of their life in jail and they find, happiness and not retribution, but like a chance at redemption in religion and doing good things because it's just positive to put out good energy, which I think is fantastic. Yeah,
and my beliefs have changed, obviously, a lot in the last, how old am I? The last 12 years.
Yeah.
But I forgot where I was going with that train of thought. I was going to say my beliefs have obviously changed a lot, but I'm also not at the same time going to try and pretend I think I'm smart enough to 100% know if there is a God. I don't fucking know.
And I think it's become, it's at the point where it's become like a moot point where it's like, does God exist? Do they exist? Do they not? I think it's become to the point where it's like, it doesn't necessarily matter. It matters how you use that belief and how you channel that belief, like how you channel spirituality, how you channel religion. Yeah. How are you taking that on board and bettering yourself and putting yourself out into the world? Are you using that to like help homelessness, help children who are starving in areas that you live in? Are you using that to teach a message of protect the weak and love everyone around you, accept everyone around you? Or are you using that as a sense of saying, well, as my religion protells, you, insert any example here, are unworthy of life.
Yeah, I think anything that you walk away from and have like long held, and by long held, I mean like me personally, I'm still kind of uncovering shit about the way I act, the way my attitude towards certain things where I'm like, oh, that's religious trauma. Cool. Love that. Anything that leaves you with deep-seated fucked up beliefs for literally a decade after, it's not good.
Yeah.
It's not good. Like, that's just my opinion. Like, especially, I'm going to tell this story as if there's not like thousands of people listening to this.
Okay.
Like, we've talked about a lot of stuff with me, not so much now, but like maybe 8 years ago when I first left the church. Like, so much of my opinion on like sex and what was like good and what was bad and what was right and what was wrong was so fucked up by what was taught in church. Like, so much of how my
or lack thereof
friendships,
well.
my friendships with my female friends, because I was so terrified of sharing any physical affection with my female friends because that's gay. Like, and being gay is bad. Like, I think anything that gives you that level of deep-seated things where a decade later you're like, oh, I still think that way because I had it like rammed into my brain for 4 years that was bad. Like, that's not good.
I think you should just, teach people that you can make your own decisions in life when it pertains to things like sexuality.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's one of the worst things that comes from these upbringings, and especially me coming from a Catholic school background, having just zero information on like sexuality, on safe sex, on
it
gender.
ends up being dangerous as well for younger people who just have no concept of how to practice safe sex.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Like, the abstinence thing is bullshit. Like, if kids want to have sex, they're going to find a way to do it. Like,
as we found out through soaking and fucking jump pumping.
Exactly.
There's ways around it.
Teach them how to do it safely. And what's so fucked up is with that soaking thing is I would almost guarantee that those kids are doing that, probably not using protection.
No.
And probably not understanding that even if you just, putting the P in the V and not moving it, you can still get an STI. You can still get pregnant.
Yeah.
Like, and it's really fucked up that these kids just have no concept of how to practice safe sex, how to take drugs safely.
Yes.
Like, all of these things that are for most people, such a normal part of growing up.
Which is, it's just fascinating how, like, we've been scared into just not talking about these topics. Like, exactly, drugs. When at festivals they have people who are at the festivals who let you safely take drugs, and they tell you what you're putting in your body is doing this to you, and it has X amount of this in you. So while you're doing it, I'll be right here, and if you go into any state of shock, we'll take you to a fucking doctor.
Yeah. And
and people want to look at that and they go, you're giving them drugs to take at a festival?
You're condoning...
The fuck is wrong with you?
Yeah. It's the whole thing, like, a lot of people, it's this running joke how, from Mean Girls, Regina George's mum is actually a fantastic mother.
Fantastic mum.
Like, she comes in, she's like, God, no, there's no alcohol in this, but, like, if you want some, like, I'll give you some. I'd much rather you do it in the house.
Yes.
Like, that's a responsible parent.
Like, she didn't come in with alcohol and said, have at it, girls. She had a mocktail and was like, if you want to do it,
so much you rather do it in the house.
Do it here.
Little things like, I was so scared of drinking when I left the church. I had no concept of what my limit with alcohol was, because I've just never really done it. I'd spent so long thinking that having more than like a glass of wine was bad, and just had no concept of what my limit with alcohol was.
Which is fucked up given the history of religion as well.
Yeah.
Just the history
Jesus
of
literally
wine.
turned water into wine.
Yeah, and you're like...
He loved his booze. Don't tell me Jesus wasn't out on a Saturday getting pissed.
And as a part of communion, we drink wine.
and eat the skin of it. That's not
Like,
even talking about. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, what the fuck? What is these weird restrictions you hold?
Yeah. I feel like we've been talking for ages, by the way. We should probably...
Yeah. Let's wrap it up.
That was a great comment. And that also directly funnels into what I was saying last week, where I was like, we flick between, we'll have one episode where we talk absolute shit. Yeah. And then we'll have one episode where we get into this real altruistic, deep and meaningful existential conversation. There you go.
Yeah, exactly. Like, we'll have conversations where we're just like, yeah, so fucking, there's this thing called soaking. And then we'll have this where we're like, sexuality and religion and, you know.
Religious trauma. Let's talk about it.
Yeah. Which
anyway,
I hope that...
We hope you enjoy this.
Well, I hope that you listening to this, if you are someone who has experienced that, or you find validation in someone else speaking about it, like not just anything we talked about, abuse or relationships or religious trauma or just religion in general, you know, if you have listened to that and you've found validation in someone talking about it, like, fantastic. We're very happy. If you are going through a state of trauma, there's help out there, there's lifelines, and there are websites you can turn to.
We do actually always, I always forget to mention this, we always actually do include links to multiple different, they are Australian resources, but we do include in the show notes of every episode resources that you can reach out to.
And just know, if you are in a different country to Australia, there are options out there for your country.
You know what? Send us like, neither of us are therapists, but like, sometimes it's easy to talk to people you don't know. Send us a message. We'll talk to you. I love talking to people.
We're not trained at all, but we can provide you with links to websites and listeners. Articles and everything, so we can send you in the right direction. But yeah, I just wanted to end that off with, like, if you are going through that, like, there is help out there.
Yeah.
Be it anything, abuse, mental health, confusion with sexuality, gender, religion, fucking anything, man. Like, there's something out there to help you through this journey. And with that...
Oh, that was weird.
That was very weird.
We'll catch you.
The code word of this week, I chose last time. Lemon. Okay.
Code word is lemon.
Is that because you made lemon curd?
No, it's because I'm literally looking in front of a lemon on my
Why are you looking at a photo of lemon?
Popped up on Facebook.
Okay. The code word is lemon because Laura's looking at photos of lemons. So do with that as you will. All right, send us in the code word and we'll give you a thumbs up, or we'll just give you a pat in the back digitally, because we can't physically there with you. Enjoy the rest of your week. We'll look forward to seeing you guys again on Friday. Send us photos of cats and dogs. Every week, Laura is doing a segment on Instagram where she shows people's pets off.
I forgot to do it last week.
Laura is not very good at remembering to do that, but she's trying. And she's doing a fantastic job.
Thank you.
Yeah. So send those in if you want to be. You get your pet featured on our Instagram stories.
The BSC podcast on all things social media.
All things socials. We also have TikTok. Check out TikTok for all our videos there.
And we'll catch you on
Friday.
Bye.
Bye.